expanding something. Because if you're staying with the same topic that you did, you still need to expand that topic. So you need to, and plus, if you had your, I didn't require an abstract in the first one. Some of you did one, some of you didn't. So you need a working title, which you can change later, but to give it some form. You need an abstract of, let's say, these 50 words, which means that you have to read some of the things that you're going to be using to be able to write some kind of abstract. All of that can be changed in the final paper, but it's like people when they go to a conference, sometimes they don't have the paper done yet, and they have to submit an abstract of what they're going to talk about. So you have to have enough knowledge that you have some idea of what you're going to be doing. If you change any of that, either the title or any aspect, but it's recognizably the same paper, that's fine. If you totally change your subject, you have to submit a new proposal. Okay, so you can't hand in a paper that has nothing to do with the proposal. So, working title, abstract, let's say 50 words. Could be longer if you want, but it should be 50 words. No text this time, obviously, but it's just an abstract. If you're staying with the same paper you had before, you can reutilize the sources you already used in your bibliography, but you have to expand it in some way. So you still need about, it's very hard to give exactly a number, 3 to 6 articles. The reason I say 3 to 6 is because some articles are very short, some are very long, some are very fundamental to the particular thing that you're going to do, or it could just be 5 hours, like let's say you're doing a paper on sex, how sex organs are called. There are lots of little papers about that. None of them is like the big fundamental paper. So then it's easy to say, and then this one looks at women's sex organs called this way, that way, the other way, and you're doing a kind of different overview than if you take a big paper like somebody I was writing to and suggested she do silencing. Well, there is the paper we did last time. Lakoff's paper, the new paper, not the old paper, about silencing, and that has all sorts of things in there. And then afterwards we did like catcalling, which is a form of silencing. So if you were using one important theoretical kind of paper as the base, you might have fewer papers. Also, if you're using, you can use any number of popular sources, like by that I mean the New York Times or all those things in prologues or things you find online, except they don't add up to, now if you have a project that you have 25 popular sources, then obviously you don't have to have 6 articles that are scholarly articles, because maybe, let's say you're doing bitch discourse, okay? Well, you might have only 3 scholarly things, 2 of which we've already read, but you're collecting from the internet all sorts of uses of bitch discourse. So then your secondary sources, your non-scholarly sources, would be like one of the projects you said, would sort of make up the bulk, but you still have to have a frame of some kind of scholarly sources, okay? And also most of them should normally be recent. But again, so don't have every one of your scholarly articles be from 98. I happen to have in this unit quite a few from the 90s because they were looking at narrative things more at the time than they are doing now. And finally, as I said, this is not required, but it adds an extra cherry to your paper, is that after you've decided what your topic is and you have your basic articles, let's say it's silencing, you find an article, and of course I don't need to add that your 3 articles can't all be required articles because everybody had to read those. So you can use all the required articles, but that just means then you have to add more articles to it. Okay, so that's understandable. So the extra cherry is that you go find in Google Scholar some other article that we didn't give you on that, to show us that you know, just like we're asking you to do the bibliography in a readable and retrievable format, which some of you did not do. You left out page numbers, or you put the journal but you didn't put the article number or whatever. So the same way that that's part of paper writing, the technique of paper writing, another technique of paper writing, Because it's only a course and we're asking you to write a paper, we give you all this material. That's why you have hundreds of articles there. But still, we want you to show us that you know how to look up something. And how do you look up something? It's actually very easy when you already have 1 or 2 or 3 articles on that subject you chose. Because all you have to do is take, let's say it's silencing and you like that Lakoff article, it's really important. All you have to do is take that article and put it in, get Google Scholar, not Google, but Google Scholar. You go into Google Scholar, you put in the article will come up in Google Scholar, and that particular article is not so new. So it will have a little number at the very bottom that you click on, and that shows you that 85 other articles have quoted that. So then you go through those articles. Often those articles are quoting it just a little bit, that they're not on the same subject. But why is that important? Because somebody maybe yesterday published an article that's on silencing, and she published that as important as it is 20 years ago. So you want to have something very recent. So that's how you find the recent things. You could also find it by just putting in keywords. But if you have trouble realizing what your keywords are, but you already have an article or 2 that you like, then you can put in the title of the article, and it will pop up in Google Scholar, and it will tell you there who quoted it, and you just scroll down and read the titles of articles, and by the titles, you'll figure out which might be relevant or not. Okay? So, and as I said, there is no real point of us putting off this aspect. It's not like saying, okay, you can't write your little paper, we'll give you 3 more days. That's not the end of the world, but here it's part of the process. Just like I told you, the little paper was part of the process that if you did great, great, and if you didn't do great, then you can see some of the errors you had and you can correct them in the larger paper. So the same way, if you don't pick a topic now, you won't have time to write the paper, and you certainly won't have the time to write the paper for the early submission. And I hope nobody does an early submission. It's much more work for us, so don't early submit. Just don't come back to us after and say you didn't like your grade and we were unfair about your grade and so forth. I once had a student 6 months later wrote to me that she wanted to redo her grade because she found out that she was a minor in linguistics and she had a C and that wouldn't give her the minor. And I said, but you didn't even hand in your paper early where you had a chance to redo it. So just don't complain if you don't hand in your paper. But don't hand it in. I don't want the extra work. Okay. So let's go back to this very exciting chapter. Since we all tend to forget everything over the weekend, let's go over again first just the outline of the first, the 4 parts we're going to do. We did part 1 and part 2 Monday, and so we're going to do, or not Monday, say Wednesday, I don't even know it, because we used to do Monday and Wednesday, and that was much easier. It's harder to cut it up. Okay. So narrativity. So we had the introduction to the whole thing. Saltmarsh's article is saying using story to change the system. That is that by telling stories, we can change our lives, like coming out stories. We can hope to change the political culture, et cetera, et cetera. So stories is how we create ourselves and we create our past. And there's 2 ways of using stories. The typical way, most people stay inside their boxes, so everything they do is they follow stereotypical stories, and there's that famous cognitive framework that we're all locked into, just like with the vocabulary, so we tell those stories. So this first part was called Gendered Narrating of Lives, Loves, Family, Courtship, and Divorce Stories. That is, those basic stories that everybody has about their lives. The second part was, now let's contrast women versus men's ways of storytelling, every day, not big novelists, everyday storytelling. In fact, the first part was mostly about women because they're the ones that tell the courtship stories. But we had a little bit about men. But the second section specifically contrasts male and female, and we kind of ended there with that long article by Georgakopoulou, the Greek, which we don't have to read, but I gave you some statistics that we'll just very quickly go over again. What are the big differences in everyday storytelling in males and females? We're going to see more of that in the masculinity unit too. So if somebody gets interested in storytelling, I can recommend you other things. which, let me say one more thing about the papers. Again, don't write to us. But if you insist on writing to us, then write to us and tell us how you want to change your paper or what paper you want to do, and we can make suggestions from other units and so forth also. And one person came to me after class and said she liked this unit, and then immediately I was able to suggest what you compare it with. Okay, so part 2 then is contrasting males and females, little stories, everyday stories. And then we ended it there, and I'll go over the important keywords in a moment. And what we're going to do today is the second part, not just gendered narratives inside the cognitive framework, or trying to break out of the cognitive framework, and males and females, so far mostly heterosexual. The second part, we're going to talk about narratives specifically about desire and sex. So erotica, pornography, harlequin romances, personal ads for sex partners in newspapers, these are all things. So number 3 is women and men sex talk. So the difference is not, as we saw in the Greek one, just who talks more or who interrupts or who has speaking roles in male and female stories, but specifically what happens in male and female sex talks. And this is one of that's the first article there, one of the saddest articles in this unit, I think, with the examples. And then we will look at the very funny article by Barrett, I left off a T on his name, who is a gay theorist actually, who has very important articles, but here he talks about self-help books for women on telling them how to do sex talk, which is very funny, and that's also required. And then with however time we're going to have left at the end, part 4 is more than just sex talk, because this is sex talk like 2 teenagers negotiating or not negotiating if they're going to make out or are they going to get laid or whatever, where the last one is actually literature, that is erotic literature of some sort. And again, harlequin romance is soft porn, women's type, formula fiction versus male porn, first the heterosexual, and then if we have time, gay and lesbian romances too, but I will name them in any case. And all of those are great topics, so somebody who wants to change topics, I want to just mention the things at least to get your interest if you're interested in a new topic or expanding your topic. Okay, so the part that we already did, just to look at those very quickly. So first, that while Saltmarsh in that introductory article, Using Story to Change Systems, was making a point that we use stories to get out of that, what another linguist called in a different context, the prison house of language. That keeps us just doing the same thing. But in fact, most people don't do that, and even people who write coming out stories, let's say, we could say, well, gee, that's really breaking out of the system because the system is the patriarchal, heteronormative system, so therefore, if you're writing a coming out story, you're obviously going against that system. That's true, except what did I tell you? The story about Hungary where they had to translate English language coming out stories in order for people to be able to write them, because you can't just sit down on a blank screen and start writing. That holds for your papers too, by the way. Right? You can't write anything like that. You have to have some material and some notes. So you say, oh, that's revolutionary. This person is writing this coming out story. But how is he or she going to do that? What parts is it going to have? How is it going to be put together? What things are going to be emphasized? And there is a pattern developing of those kind of stories. So there's always some kind of models. But the main article in this first part, Gender Narrating Lives, Laws, Family, Courtship, was this article that I've told you 15 times that I love, and anybody who doesn't read it and so doesn't get in on the test too is an idiot, okay? So, just to say it nicely. Silverstein, 1988, a very old article, so if I'm citing something like that, there's a reason I'm citing it. And what is the key word in that article? Does anybody remember the key word? All these women in 3 generations telling stories that change but don't really change, and the men don't even know what's going on. They'll say, ask my wife, I don't remember when I met her. Yes?
Vocabulary of motive.
Vocabulary of motive, very important. So all their stories are stereotypical, basically, but the important central thing is that they have to say it a certain way. Remember, the first generation woman, the grandmother says, I fell in love with a lawyer. It was love at first sight. We got married. We had 2 beautiful children. It was wonderful. besides the fact that it wasn't,